On August 19, 1944, at the headquarters in East Prussia, Generaloberst Alfred Jodl examined the latest intelligence reports detailing the deteriorating situation on the Western Front. His staff had analyzed the Allied supply lines extending over 400 miles from Normandy to Patton's rapidly advancing Third Army. The Americans were stretching their logistics to the breaking point, and Patton's forces would soon be forced to halt due to fuel shortages. It was clear that an army cannot sustain such rapid advances without reliable supplies. From his vantage point at Hitler's Wolf's Lair headquarters, Jodl reviewed what every German general knew from experience. A single armored division required 150,000 gallons of fuel per day during offensive operations. The Americans were now 400 miles away from their supply bases, and the mathematics dictated that Patton would soon be compelled to stop advancing. However, unbeknownst to Jodl, just 125 miles away, an immense convoy of 5958 trucks was already heading eastward in a continuous stream. These vehicles were defying military doctrine with their headlights blazing, transporting 12,500 tons of supplies every day. This operation, known as the Red Ball Express, was so unprecedented that it had never been considered possible by German military strategists. Within 3 days, Patton's supposedly stalled tanks would break through German defenses at the Seine River, and within a week liberate Paris. By the end of the month, they would be poised at the German border. The Red Ball Express, powered by 23,000 truck drivers, 75% of whom were African American, had transformed a one-way highway system into an unprecedentedly efficient supply line. The confidence of the German High Command in predicting American logistical collapse was rooted in long-standing military expertise and recent observations. However, this audacious logistics operation would soon shatter their assumptions about mechanized warfare, delivering a lesson in modern combat delivered by thousands of dedicated truck drivers. The Wehrmacht had spearheaded the blitzkrieg tactic, revolutionizing combined arms warfare and gaining a deep understanding of the challenges posed by supply lines. Their own military operations frequently ground to a halt when logistics failed to support tactical successes. In Russia, the initial impediment to German advances was not primarily Soviet resistance, but rather their inability to sustain supplies over extensive distances. German vehicles often broke down on Russian roads, and horse-drawn carts, which constituted 80% of German transportation, struggled to keep pace with mechanized units like the Panzer divisions. Differences in railway gauges caused supply delays, with materials piling up hundreds of miles behind the front lines. In July, General Heinrich von Ludwitz, who would later command the 47th Panzer Corps starting in September 1944, observed that American forces faced a similar logistical dilemma to what German troops encountered in Russia. He noted that while mechanized vehicles provided an initial advantage, they also required substantial amounts of fuel, ammunition, and spare parts. The Americans had advanced 400 miles in just 30 days, but were now approaching the limits of their supply capabilities. According to historical precedents, logistical issues would soon lead to a paralysis of operations unless addressed effectively. German intelligence meticulously monitored American consumption rates. For instance, a Sherman tank consumed approximately 0.5 miles per gallon on roads and even less off-road. An infantry division needed around 700 tons of supplies each day, while an armored division required up to 1,000 tons daily. General Siegfried Westphal, who would later serve as Chief of Staff to Field Marshal von Rundstedt from September onwards, calculated on August 20th that the Americans could not sustain General Patton's advance for more than another 48 hours, even if they had unlimited trucks and perfect road conditions, which was highly improbable given the current situation. The laws of physics are immutable, even for American industry. On August 25, 1944, at 2 p.m., Lieutenant Colonel Lauren A. Aries from the Motor Transport Service addressed a room filled with doubtful officers in a requisitioned French chateau near LSA. The figures they presented were unambiguous. Third Army was consuming supplies at an unprecedented rate, surpassing all historical records and logistical plans. Traditional supply methods such as rail transport, scheduled convoys, and depot distribution had succumbed to the pressure. Aries then declared his intention to establish a one-way highway stretching from Cherbourg and the beaches to the front lines. Every vehicle would operate non-stop for 20 hours out of every 24, halting only for fuel or emergencies. The goal was to move a minimum of 12,500 tons daily. This initiative drew its name from railroad terminology, where a red ball freight indicated top priority and superseded all other shipments. The Red Ball Express would function on the same principle: absolute priority with no delays or exceptions. Its technical specifications contradicted German military doctrine entirely. The plan involved two parallel one-way highways, one for trucks carrying supplies heading forward, another for empty vehicles returning. Continuous 24-hour operations with headlights illuminated day and night, disregarding blackout restrictions. Vehicles would only stop for refueling or mechanical issues. Convoy intervals were set at 5-minute gaps while maintaining an average speed of 35 miles per hour. Mobile maintenance units would be stationed every 50 miles, and military police checkpoints would remove any vehicle traveling below 25 miles per hour. Colonel Charles O. Thrasher oversaw the advanced section of ADSEC and reviewed the projected numbers. The requirement was for 140 truck companies, with a minimum of 5958 vehicles operating at 90% availability, a feat deemed impossible according to any logistics manual. Yet within 36 hours, this seemingly insurmountable task became reality. On August 26, 1944, drivers from the 3,916th Quartermaster Truck Company loaded their GMC CCKW 2.5-ton trucks, nicknamed Duce and a Half, with 105mm artillery shells destined for the battery guns at Melun, situated 300 miles to the east. The racial makeup of the Red Ball Express would have astonished German theorists. Of the approximately 23,000 drivers who eventually operated on this route, around 75% were African-American soldiers serving in a segregated military force. These men, unable to dine at white restaurants or use white facilities across much of America, were crucial in sustaining the movement of celebrated white generals' armies. The drivers quickly developed their own culture. They painted slogans on their trucks such as Patton's, Blood Banks, Hitler, Here We Come, and Detroit to Berlin Express. They also established their unique traffic rules. Slow vehicles had to pull over immediately, mechanical issues were pushed off the road into ditches, and any truck moving below 20 miles per hour was considered a roadblock. By August 28, German reconnaissance units reported an unprecedented sight. Units from Aufklärungs radioed back observations of the main Red Ball route. They described a continuous column of vehicles, with headlights visible for 20 kilometers without any spacing or blackout discipline, and estimated that around 1,000 vehicles were passing per hour. The Germans concluded that the Americans had abandoned all military precautions. This contravened all the principles set forth by German military doctrine. Activating headlights at night invited aerial bombardment, while continuous lines of vehicles made ideal targets for enemy artillery. A single disabled truck could paralyze an entire convoy if there was no room to maneuver around it. Despite this, the Americans appeared indifferent. On August 30, General Lieutenant Edgar Feuchtinger, commander of the 21st Panzer Division, observed the Red Ball Express from a concealed position and reported his findings to Army Group B headquarters with increasing concern. His report conveyed that the enemy's supply system was beyond their comprehension. Vehicles passed every 30 seconds day and night without interruption, showing no signs of caution or dispersion. They did not adhere to any rules that the Germans understood. It was not conventional military science, but rather a mass production approach applied to warfare. The Germans were baffled because American logistics operated on entirely different principles. While German doctrine stressed concealment, the Americans relied on sheer volume. Where the Germans conserved their vehicles and equipment, the Americans anticipated up to 20% mechanical failure and planned accordingly. Instead of rigid adherence to military procedures, the Americans continuously improvised. The tonnage delivered by the Red Ball Express exceeded what German calculations deemed logistically feasible. During the first week, from August 25 to 31, 1944, they managed to deliver an astounding 89,939 tons of supplies, averaging 12,848 tons per day. The round-trip distance was 686 miles. The operation involved 59-58 trucks, making an average of 1.5 trips each day. A total of 300,000 gallons of fuel were consumed by the initiative. German logistics experts dismissed these figures as propaganda when they discovered them in American documents, but the numbers were accurate and continually increasing. By September 5th, the Red Ball Express had set a pace that seemed impossible to German officers who still depended heavily on horse-drawn wagons for transportation. Every 5 minutes, convoys departed from the western starting point. The typical convoy consisted of 67 vehicles, each carrying an average load of 5 tons and frequently exceeding this with 7-ton overloads. It took around 14 hours to cover a one-way distance of 350 miles, with 2 hours required for turnaround at either end. At any given time, approximately 5,000 trucks were in constant motion. The Red Ball Express continually generated new solutions, hourly, as drivers and mechanics tackled challenges previously thought unsolvable by German military science. When trucks broke down, approximately 18 per day, mobile maintenance units performed roadside repairs within 15 minutes or moved the vehicles off the road if they could not be fixed quickly. Spare parts were scavenged from irreparable vehicles, and engines could be swapped in just 45 minutes using mobile cranes. When congestion became an issue on designated routes, drivers would establish alternative paths. They also commandeered French buses to transport personnel, thereby freeing up trucks for cargo duties. They acquired German vehicles, repainting them in olive drab and putting them into operation. They constructed detours around obliterated bridges by using debris from bombed-out structures as fill material. The Germans witnessed this apparent disorder that somehow yielded order but failed to grasp it. Their logistics philosophy stressed meticulous planning, maintenance routines, and adherence to established protocols. In stark contrast, the Americans disregarded all these principles yet managed to thrive rather than falter. Most astonishingly, their fuel management system baffled German observers. The Red Ball Express alone consumed 300,000 gallons of gasoline daily for its own functions, more than what many German armies received in total for all purposes. Despite this immense consumption, fuel never ran out. The Americans had also devised an extraordinary solution, Operation Pluto, which entailed laying submarine pipelines across the English Channel to transport fuel underwater. By September 1944, these pipes were operational and undetected by German intelligence. Along the Red Ball route, forward fuel depots were set up every 25 miles. Tanker trucks operated a parallel convoy system that ensured no vehicle waited more than 10 minutes for refueling. General Major Walter Wallemont noted from aerial reconnaissance photographs that American fuel reserves exceeded our strategic stockpiles by far. They consumed more gasoline in moving it around than we allocated to entire panzer divisions. This is not warfare as we comprehend it. Rather, it resembles an industrial-scale operation. The Red Ball Express did more than just supply. It exponentially multiplied its pace of advancement. German military doctrine estimated that an armored division could achieve a 20-tominous 30-mile daily advance under ideal circumstances. The Red Ball Express divisions typically covered distances ranging from 40 to 60 miles each day for several weeks. On September 1, 1944, the 4th Armored Division made a significant advance of 35 miles in the morning and paused at noon for resupply. By then, trucks carrying fuel and ammunition were already waiting. The division continued its advance with another 32 miles traveled in the afternoon, reaching a total of 67 miles in a single day. This unprecedented progress shattered German defensive plans, which had predicted daily advances not exceeding 30 miles. General O. Burst Heinz Guderian, upon reviewing reports from East Prussia, initially dismissed them as impossible. According to him, no armored force could sustain a 60-mile advance for an entire week due to inevitable mechanical failures. The general concluded that these reports were either propaganda or misidentified movements. However, intercepted American radio communications confirmed the reports. Even more alarming was the fact that the Americans openly broadcast their positions without using coded messages, demonstrating unwavering confidence in their ability to outmaneuver the Germans. By September 5, 1944, German intelligence had compiled detailed reports on the Red Ball Express operations. These findings were devastating for Wehrmacht planning, as they revealed that all previous assumptions about American military capabilities needed revision. The report included observations that contradicted established German military principles. For instance, Americans abandoned damaged vehicles rather than attempting repairs, while drivers operated on stimulants over extended periods, disregarding standard personnel management practices. There was also a lack of camouflage discipline, making the entire system vulnerable to air attacks that never materialized. Despite daily mechanical failures at a rate of 30%, redundancy ensured continued operations. Fuel consumption levels were so high they would be unaffordable for any European military. Field Marshal Walter Model's reaction underscored his growing desperation in response to these developments. If these reports are true, we confront not a superior military force, but an advanced civilization. They do not attempt to conceal their presence because they have no fear of us. They squander resources as if they were limitless. Military strategies alone will not suffice against them. The drivers of the Red Ball Express paid a heavy physical toll that German observers could not fathom. These individuals operated continuously for 72 hours, experiencing hallucinations due to exhaustion and the effects of benzodiazepines. During their operation period, 300 drivers lost their lives due to accidents in foggy conditions, overturned trucks on damaged roads, and vehicles burning from overheated engines. Despite these challenges, morale remained incredibly high. These men, predominantly African American and denied equal rights at home, were aware of the historical significance of their work. With every mile they drove and every ton they delivered, they disproved Hitler's racial theories. German prisoners offered compelling testimony about the impact of the Red Ball Express. Oberst Hans von Luck, captured in September 1944, told his interrogators that it became clear to them they had lost when they understood the American supply system. Despite violating every rule and wasting fuel, abandoning vehicles and exhausting drivers, the Americans succeeded through sheer volume. They had industrialized warfare beyond our understanding. The psychological effect on German forces was profound. Wehrmacht soldiers could hear American trucks operating non-stop throughout the night, with endless motors and an endless supply of ammunition. While they had only 3 rounds per rifle, the Americans were bringing in millions of rounds. The constant noise itself became a form of psychological warfare. Even the vehicles themselves amazed German engineers. The GMCCCK WWII 2.5-ton truck, a cornerstone of the Red Ball Express operation, epitomized mass production efficiency. By the end of World War II, General Motors had manufactured over 500,000 of these vehicles, surpassing the total number of trucks produced by the German military across all types combined. These trucks featured numerous innovations that outpaced their German counterparts. For example, they were equipped with standard 4-wheel drive and automatic tire inflation systems. They could ford water up to 30 inches deep due to waterproofing features, ran on low-quality fuel without needing modifications, and had heaters that functioned effectively in winter conditions. Even more remarkable was the American approach to maintenance. While German mechanics focused on rebuilding engines and conserving parts meticulously, American crews preferred replacing entire vehicles for minor issues. Additionally, whereas Germany relied heavily on a small number of highly skilled mechanics, the United States deployed thousands of competent technicians who could handle 80% of repairs efficiently. As the front lines advanced eastward, the Red Ball Express adapted at an astonishing pace that left German logistics planners in awe, accustomed as they were to weeks of preparation for any significant logistical shifts. When the initial route through Chartres proved inadequate, American forces swiftly created new extensions within a single night. Examples include the White Ball Express via Rouen to Paris, Green Diamond at Cherbourg, a rail transfer point, Red Lion through Bayeux to Brussels, and a BC connecting Antwerp, Brussels, Charleroi. Each newly established route became operational within 48 hours of its conception, whereas German logistics staff required weeks for similar undertakings. The predominance of African-American drivers in the Red Ball Express presented a stark contradiction to Nazi racial theories. According to Nazi ideology, blacks were deemed inferior and incapable of technical tasks or initiative. Yet these very drivers were executing logistical feats that German forces could not replicate. The African-American soldiers were acutely aware of this irony. They knew what the Nazis believed about them and used it as motivation to prove Hitler wrong with every mile they drove. They combated racism with truck keys and triumphed over Nazi ideology through superior efficiency. German prisoners compelled to load Red Ball trucks as laborers had their beliefs shattered when they worked alongside African-American sergeants who calculated weight distributions more swiftly than German engineers. These same prisoners discovered that the African-American sergeants spoke better English than their own language instructors back home, despite everything the Nazis had told them about racial hierarchies. The Red Ball Express demanded infrastructure that Germans believed was impossible to construct under combat conditions. Engineers either built or reinforced 40 bridges, established 15 major fuel depots, set up 26 maintenance stations, and created 8 temporary cities for drivers, all while the operation continued without pause. The bridge at Monty had been demolished by German engineers, specifically to halt American logistics. The Wehrmacht estimated that replacing it would take a minimum of 6 weeks. However, American engineers constructed a temporary bridge in just 14 hours, and Red Ball convoys detoured only 8 miles via hastily bulldozed bypass roads. German engineers watched American construction methods with amazement. There were no planning meetings or detailed blueprints, just immediate action taken on the spot. The Americans built faster than Germans could destroy, erecting infrastructure that seemed to appear overnight in French fields. One particular achievement of the Red Ball Express left German artillery officers stunned. Ammunition supply rates that surpassed their highest theoretical calculations. American artillery units fired without restraint, a luxury not enjoyed by any German unit since 1942. During the reduction of Metz fortifications in September 1944, the XDX Corps artillery fired 100,000 rounds within 24 hours. The Red Ball Express delivered every round and an additional 20% surplus ammunition. In contrast, German artillery defending Metz was rationed to 50 rounds per gun per day. The disparity in firepower was overwhelming. American guns could fire continuously for hours, while German artillery officers calculated that such bombardments required 50 truckloads of ammunition per hour. The Red Ball provided this without a moment's hesitation. The Red Ball Express consumed vehicles at an unprecedented rate, which would have paralyzed any other military force. By late September, mechanical attrition was staggering. The average vehicle lifespan had dropped to just 10,000 miles, with normal replacement intervals being 30,000 miles. Daily repairs and replacements consumed 30% of all vehicles. Engines were replaced at a rate of 500 per week. Tires were consumed at a rate of 10,000 per week, and over 5,000 vehicles had been destroyed or abandoned. Despite ongoing losses, American production was prepared for such contingencies. Each week, ships laden with hundreds of new trucks arrived at French ports. Drivers were trained and deployed in just 2 days. German analysts found that the Americans were destroying more trucks each week than France's entire fleet could accommodate. Despite this, the transport capacity continued to grow rather than diminish. The Americans had accomplished what the Germans believed was impossible: logistics outpacing consumption. Along the Red Ball route, French civilians witnessed an abundance of American supplies, starkly contrasting with years of scarcity under German occupation. This dramatic shift in availability had a significant and immediate psychological impact on the occupied population. Drivers of the Red Ball Express, including many African Americans, frequently shared their rations with local civilians despite regulations forbidding it. At every stop, children would gather to receive chocolate, cigarettes, and soap from the drivers. The stark contrast between American generosity and German strictness was evident. Reports indicated that Germans were concerned about the propaganda effects of such acts. French civilians increasingly viewed an American victory as inevitable, attributing this belief to the constant flow of supply trucks. Resistance activities along the Red Ball routes had surged by 400%. The population, once accepting German occupation, now actively opposed it. In early September 1944, the Red Ball Express encountered its most formidable challenge yet. General Patton's Third Army had advanced so rapidly that maintaining supply levels was a daunting task. A round trip for supplies now stretched to over 700 miles. Drivers were succumbing to exhaustion, and vehicles were deteriorating. German intelligence picked up on the mounting pressure. On September 8, General Dale Panzertruppe Hasselhoff Manteuffel issued a report. Signs of strain appeared in American supply lines, with convoy intervals stretching from 5 minutes to 15 minutes. The pace of vehicle movement had also slowed down significantly. However, this was seen as an opportunity. Yet the Americans once again demonstrated their adaptability and surprised the Germans. In just 72 hours, they restructured the Red Ball Express. They established intermediate transfer points, reducing individual run lengths to 350 miles, introduced driver rotation systems, set up forward maintenance bases, and doubled the number of assigned vehicles. By September 12, supply deliveries had not only stabilized but also increased. The crisis that was expected to cripple Patton's advance instead bolstered the logistical network. To further support the Red Ball Express, Americans employed another logistics strategy that Germans deemed unfeasible: large-scale aerial resupply operations. C-47 transport planes began delivering essential supplies directly to forward units, each carrying 3 tons of cargo. On September 16, 1944, German observers recorded 900 transport flights in a single day, delivering a total of 27,000 tons by air. Even at its peak, the Luftwaffe managed only 300 tons daily to Stalingrad, and considered this an enormous effort. The Americans used their transport aircraft as if they were trucks, with no concern for fighter escort or fuel constraints. They accepted losses, but overwhelmed German defenses through sheer numbers. The Wehrmacht could not keep up with this industrial efficiency. The Red Ball Express functioned under command principles that defied the German military structure. Junior officers made decisions typically reserved for generals within the Wehrmacht. Sergeants commanded operations larger than what German battalions managed. This decentralization bewildered German observers. American logistics operated without apparent central control. Each lieutenant acted like a general, and each sergeant behaved as if he were a colonel. Chaos should have ensued, but instead, they achieved efficiency that the Wehrmacht could not match with its rigid hierarchy. By October 1944, advancing railheads began to diminish Red Ball Express requirements. The operation, which was initially planned for 10 days, continued for 82 days and delivered 412,000 tons of supplies over 122 million ton-miles. German commanders, now fighting on their own soil, reflected upon what they had witnessed. Field Marshal Model wrote in his final report that they were not defeated primarily by American tanks or aircraft. They were defeated by American trucks. The Red Ball Express demonstrated that in modern warfare, logistics is strategy. The shift to rail transport was also remarkable. American railroad engineers rebuilt 1,000 miles of destroyed French railway lines, while the Red Ball Express was operational. They laid new track faster than Germans had destroyed it, often using captured German equipment. The final statistics of the Red Ball Express confounded every German calculation of logistical possibility. During 82 days of operation, 412,393 tons of supplies were delivered over 20 to 22 million ton-miles. On average, 5,958 vehicles were in use, with a peak of 7,000 at one time. 23,000 total drivers were employed, consuming 700,000 gallons of fuel daily and delivering 40,000 tons of ammunition specifically for Patton's forces alone. Additionally, 15 million rations and 135,000 medical supply tons were transported. In captivity, German officers admitted that they had underestimated American logistics based on European precedents. They vastly exceeded their previous best by a factor of 3, but even that did not approach the true American peak capability, which surpassed it by an order of magnitude. Beyond sheer tonnage and distance covered, the Red Ball Express accomplished something far more significant. It shattered German confidence in their military prowess. Officers from the Wehrmacht, who had previously dismissed Americans as soft and overly reliant on machinery, witnessed these same troops achieving logistical feats through sheer determination and industrial might. Prisoners of war from Germany would stand silently by camp fences, counting the passing Red Ball trucks, some even weeping. They realized that what they were seeing meant more than just the ability to supply their armies. It revealed a capacity for waste that outstripped German production capabilities. They saw their entire worldview crumbling, truck by truck. The operation also brought an unexpected racial awakening within the American military. Its success hinged largely on African American soldiers who faced segregation and discrimination, denied equal treatment and combat roles. When General Eisenhower visited Red Ball operations in September 1944, he observed this contradiction firsthand. His aide, Captain Harry Butcher, noted that the general watched black drivers working tirelessly for 20 hours straight and remarked, "These men are winning the war as surely as any infantrymen. We must reconsider many things." This success generated pressure for integration, which contributed to military desegregation 3 years later. African American soldiers had demonstrated in France what they always knew: they could match anyone given equal opportunity and resources. The Red Ball Express was their battlefield, and they won it decisively. German racial theorists struggled to account for this contradiction, leading SS publications on racial science to cease mentioning American logistical achievements altogether. The sheer volume of evidence made it impossible to refute, yet its acknowledgement was too harmful. After World War II, German military engineers extensively analyzed the operations of the Red Ball Express. These studies fundamentally transformed global logistics thinking, highlighting that volume can compensate for inefficiency. Mechanical redundancy reduces vulnerability, while decentralized execution enhances speed, and standardization amplifies capability. Human endurance has its limits, but those limits are greater than initially thought. In 1950, General Franz Halder, the former chief of the German General Staff, wrote that the Red Ball Express demonstrated how logistics dictated strategy rather than vice versa. The Americans grasped this concept, whereas we learned it too late. Among the approximately 23,000 drivers involved in the operation, numerous tales of individual heroism emerged, which were inconceivable within the German military context. These accounts, corroborated by official military records, included stories like that of Corporal John L. Houston, who drove non-stop for 48 hours to deliver ammunition to the 2nd Armored Division at Cambrai, nodding off 3 times, but being revived by fellow drivers each time. Another driver, Private Booker T. Washington, witnessed his truck catch fire due to overheated brakes while carrying medical supplies. Rather than abandoning it as protocol dictated, he continued driving the burning vehicle 2 miles to a field hospital, only exiting when flames reached the cab. The supplies saved lives of soldiers from both sides. Such acts were replicated countless times and exposed the American military culture to German observers, highlighting individual initiative, calculated risk-taking, and mission accomplishment over strict adherence to regulations. In late 1944, during the Battle of the Bulge, desperate German forces attempted to replicate the Red Ball Express with Operation Griff, planning to use captured American trucks for their supply lines. However, this endeavor failed almost immediately due to German drivers' inability to match the speed of their American counterparts. German technicians struggled to keep American machinery operational at the necessary pace. The nation's fuel reserves also faltered under the strain of high usage rates. At its core, Germany lacked the American mindset of limitless resources. Obst Otto Scottson, who oversaw the operation, noted that out of 50 captured American trucks, only 20 were still in use a week later due to maintenance issues. The Americans would have swiftly replaced those vehicles. This disparity was a key factor in our downfall. The winter season between 1944 and 1945 posed the ultimate challenge for the Red Ball Express. Freezing rain, snow, and ice should have halted all wheeled transportation. German military doctrine held that logistical operations with wheels became impractical at temperatures below -10 degrees Celsius. Nevertheless, the Red Ball Express pressed on regardless of adverse conditions. Drivers equipped their vehicles with tire chains, added alcohol to radiator fluids, and continued their missions undeterred. despite a significant reduction in speed, from 35 miles per hour to just 15. The system maintained its capacity for delivering supplies consistently. German observers noted that ice-laden convoys moved through blizzards that had immobilized tank divisions. The American logistics network proved resilient and effective, irrespective of weather conditions or enemy interference. Though it may not have been the epitome of elegance or efficiency from a German perspective, this system was remarkably robust against all challenges. By May 1945, captured German logistics officers were compelled to study Red Ball Express operations for historical documentation. Their assessments were uniformly critical and damaging to German military prestige. General de Infantry Friedrich Schultz encapsulated these sentiments succinctly. The Red Ball Express exemplifies a form of warfare that surpassed our imagination. Thousands of men and vehicles, transporting millions of tons of supplies, formed a fleeting civilization that disappeared once its purpose was fulfilled. While we constructed enduring infrastructure over many years, they devised an exceptional temporary system within days. The most profound insights into this phenomenon came from General Heinz Guderian, the architect of German armored warfare. Although we invented Blitzkrieg, our logistical challenges remained unresolved. However, Americans addressed these issues through industrial capabilities that seemed beyond belief. The Red Ball Express was not merely a supply line, but a torrent of materials that overwhelmed enemy forces. It cost the United States about $100 million in 1944 dollars for its operations, including vehicle losses, fuel consumption, road damage, and claims from France. German staff officers accustomed to managing limited resources found these figures hard to comprehend, whereas Americans viewed them as a minor expense. This operation facilitated the capture of 400,000 German soldiers, the liberation of France, Belgium, and Luxembourg, and shortened the war by approximately 6 months. Each day of conflict cost America $250 million, making the Red Ball Express pay for itself within a single day of reduced fighting. Lieutenant General John C.H. Lee, who commanded logistics in Europe, stated that they expended 5,000 trucks and 23,000 men to defeat the German army in France. In any earlier conflict, such losses would be considered catastrophic. But in American industrial warfare, these numbers were seen as acceptable overhead. Another unforeseen outcome of the Red Ball Express was its significant influence on civilian logistics after the war. Thousands of drivers came back to the United States with first-hand experience maneuvering through the world's largest transportation network. These seasoned veterans established trucking companies and played key roles in designing interstate highways, ultimately shaping the modern American logistics industry. Businesses such as Yellow Freight, Roadway, and Consolidated Freightways were founded by Red Ball veterans who brought military logistics principles to civilian business operations. They understood from their experiences in France that high volume surpasses efficiency, speed trumps perfection, and continuous truck movement around the clock can shift global dynamics. Military experts universally acknowledge the Red Ball Express as a pivotal logistics operation within the European theater. Without it, advancing American forces would have been halted, causing Paris to fall weeks later, allowing German troops to fortify their winter defensive positions successfully. The operation affirmed American military doctrine that prioritized logistical capabilities over tactical maneuvers. While German officers focused on studying cloud formations and battlefield tactics, Americans delved into the intricacies of Detroit's assembly lines and railway schedules. This demonstrated that in contemporary warfare, the capacity to sustain supply chains is more critical than tactical genius. On September 15, 1944, Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, the top German commander in Western Europe, received detailed intelligence about the Red Ball Express operation. After reviewing these reports for several hours, he gathered his staff and declared, "We are facing a challenge that goes beyond military solutions." He noted that American forces had developed a supply system where distance is inconsequential. Their strategic assumption was based on an advancing force eventually outstripping its logistical support, but this point never materialized. The Red Ball Express had fundamentally transformed warfare, and the Germans were engaged in outdated tactics. His operations officer, Oberst Hans Spittel, proposed disrupting the Red Ball routes using whatever remained of the Luftwaffe forces. Von Rundstedt's reply conveyed a clear understanding. "With what do we disrupt? They possess 6,000 trucks. Even if we could destroy 1,000, which is unlikely, they would replace them within a week. To counter their production rate, we would need to destroy 200 trucks every day. We lack even that many aircraft in total." Behind these figures were human tales that illustrated the American spirit to German witnesses. Drivers who had gone without sleep for 3 days refused to be relieved because they feared their vehicles might fail. Mechanics labored under freezing rain to keep the convoys moving. Teenagers misrepresented their age to operate trucks. These narratives proliferated throughout the operation, weaving a mythology that disheartened German forces. The Americans proved more resilient and driven than propaganda depicted them as being. They pushed themselves harder than Germans drove their horses, but out of determination rather than fear. This made them a greater threat than German military theory had anticipated. The Red Ball Express inadvertently became an influential form of psychological warfare, surpassing any deliberate operation. At night, German soldiers could hear the continuous rumble of convoy engines that never ceased. The mere sound itself served as psychological warfare. German units reported hearing phantom convoys that demoralized troops just as effectively as real logistics did. The realization that Americans possessed seemingly endless supplies, while Germans were conserving their last rounds, created a sense of despair that weakened combat readiness. Recognizing the impact, American psychological warfare teams began broadcasting truck engine noises toward German lines, even when no actual convoys were present. These phantom sounds convinced German units to report them as real, highlighting the profound psychological toll inflicted by the Red Ball Express. In November 1944, with rail lines partially restored, the Red Ball Express was officially phased out. However, its methods had permanently transformed military logistics. The idea of continuous, high-volume supply, even if wasteful, became a cornerstone of American military doctrine. The last and most significant innovation was the rapid dissolution of the operation. In just 3 days, an enormous force comprising 23,000 troops, 6,000 vehicles, and numerous installations vanished without a trace. Troops were reassigned, vehicles reallocated, and routes returned to civilian use. The Germans needed months to establish smaller operations and years to dismantle them. American forces would build what they required, utilize it efficiently, and then discard it in favor of something better. When German generals surrendered in May 1945, many cited the Red Ball Express as a demonstration of the futility of continued resistance. During his interrogation, General der Panzertrupp Hasshoffen-Manteuffels remarked that upon realizing the Allies' logistical capabilities, they understood the war was lost. "Your supply lines were faster than our ability to disrupt them. The Red Ball Express was an unstoppable force for which we had no countermeasure." When Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, one of Germany's most capable commanders, was asked what surprised him most about American forces, he replied that it wasn't their tanks or planes, but rather their trucks. The operation revealed the extent to which America had mobilized its entire industrial capacity for military purposes. We were fighting against the production capabilities of your factories as much as against your soldiers. The final statistics of the Red Ball Express are a testament to American industrial might. 412,193 tons of cargo delivered. 122 million ton miles traveled. An average daily employment of 59-58 trucks with a peak of 7,000. 23,000 drivers involved in total, operating for 82 days, consuming 57 million gallons of fuel, wearing out 180,000 tires, and losing 5,000 vehicles. The cost amounted to $100 million. German divisions were overcome due to a strategic supply edge in 1947. This advantage potentially reduced the duration of the war by around 180 days. These figures speak to a transformation that went beyond mere military operations. They illustrate the pivotal moment when warfare fundamentally changed, emphasizing industrial capacity over tactical prowess, and making logistics an integral part of strategy rather than a secondary concern. In 1994, marking the 50th anniversary of D-Day, the United States Postal Service released a commemorative stamp at the National Postal Museum in Washington, D.C., to honor the Red Ball Express. This ceremony acknowledged an operation that had been overshadowed by combat activities, but was crucial for the Allied victory. Veterans who attended expressed their pride in an effort that showcased American industrial strength and individual resolve. They operated under extreme conditions, through fatigue, mechanical breakdowns, and adverse weather, which halted armored advances. The Red Ball Express was largely composed of black soldiers who faced segregation and discrimination during the war yet played a decisive role. Operating at 35 miles per hour, they delivered victory despite being denied recognition during the conflict. This operation demonstrated that in contemporary warfare, logistics is not merely supportive but central to success. It underscored the ability of an industrial democracy to mobilize resources on a scale unmatched by totalitarian systems. German military leaders had initially dismissed American logistical capabilities, assuming they would adhere to European practices of resource conservation and cautious advancement. However, the Red Ball Express created a logistical tsunami that overwhelmed German forces with Allied abundance. Success did not stem from tactical brilliance, but rather from uniquely American traits such as industrial surplus, mechanical skill, improvisation, and individual initiative, a contrast to the rigid hierarchical structure of the Wehrmacht. In his memoirs, General George S. Patton, whose Third Army greatly benefited from the Red Ball Express, paid tribute to these truck drivers by stating that they deserved equal credit for defeating Germany as any combat unit did. Despite fatigue, mechanical issues, and harsh weather conditions that would have halted armored vehicles, they pressed onward. Their efforts were crucial for the Third Army's progress. Without their movement, victory would not be possible. Predominantly African-American soldiers, they faced segregation, discrimination, and lack of recognition. Yet they contributed to winning the war just as much as any rifleman did. This truth must be acknowledged in history. The Red Ball Express comprised 23,000 predominantly black drivers who operated around 6,000 trucks on a single-lane highway towards victory. They achieved what German military experts deemed impossible by supplying advancing forces faster than physics suggested and maintaining the pace beyond human limits. In modern warfare, it became evident that having more trucks gave an advantage over superior tactics. Initially, German generals mocked American logistics for being wasteful, undisciplined, and unsustainable. However, 82 days later, these same generals surrendered to armies supplied by the Red Ball Express. recognizing that American trucks had outperformed German tanks. The industrial might of America proved formidable against military excellence, demonstrating that logistics could be strategic. The operation ended on November 16, 1944, but its impact resonated through military history. It showed that in an industrial era, success belonged not to the bravest soldiers or most brilliant generals, but to the nation delivering supplies at unprecedented speed and scale. The German commanders who ridiculed American logistics in August 1944 surrendered by May 1945, defeated by 23,000 truck drivers who revolutionized warfare at a steady pace of 35 miles per hour. Their story merits recognition as one of the great military operations for its effectiveness, not elegance or efficiency. The Red Ball Express kept the German forces in retreat and proved that in modern conflict, convoys of trucks are more critical than columns of tanks. French highways still bear the marks of this operation, with ruts from heavily loaded vehicles, hastily repaired bridges, and abandoned machinery lining roadsides. Ultimately, the greatest tribute to the Red Ball Express lies in how it shortened the war significantly. Every day saved reduced casualties. Thanks to these drivers, victory was hastened by months. The lesson learned by German generals who mocked American logistics is that amateurs discuss tactics while professionals focus on logistics. Americans spoke of trucks. The roar of 6,000 engines never ceased as they carried democracy and destruction down a one-way path to triumph. A quote from an unidentified German officer at the 1994 commemoration echoed this sentiment, captured by a Red Ball driver reflecting on the operation's legacy. Beside a Belgian road, an officer with a foreign accent observed the continuous stream of American trucks passing by and remarked to his captors that while they had anticipated every aspect of warfare, from tanks to planes to ships, they had not envisaged the sheer number of trucks. He pondered aloud how one could possibly overcome an adversary who possessed more transport vehicles than there were enemy soldiers on the battlefield. The solution to this strategic puzzle was evident in the steady procession of fatigued American drivers, each delivering critical supplies that were transforming logistics into a decisive military strategy and turning trucks into weapons of war. The Red Ball Express had revolutionized the concept of supply as a means to achieve victory, demonstrating how an unparalleled logistical operation could become the cornerstone of success in Europe. By the time German commanders realized this new truth about the importance of mobility and resupply, it was too late. The pattern of American dominance was already unfolding at their doorstep, fueled by the most sophisticated logistics effort ever seen in military history.